It's pretty good.
Wine? You
Yep,
just drink wine.
yep. We, we,
It's a
we always
party.
we have a bottle of wine every week. We tell everybody what we're drinking.
And I say, brother, but he wind up knocking back down on me. Oh, for the times that I thought I couldn't last for long. Now I think I'm able, Father.
To carry on.
It's been a long
Long time coming.
time coming.
All right.
But I
Welcome everybody to another edition of CV Tech Talk. It's going to be a great edition this week. I want to welcome our co-moderators tonight, Ron Jenkins and Richard Harrison are joining us tonight. Tonight our topic is it's a time to listen. Right now here in America, it's a difficult time for our country. Racial injustice is an undercurrent theme again, really out there in the open right now. And as educators here in the Central Valley and across the country, as educators, we have a powerful platform and to dealing with racial injustice. How can we as educators do better? I know a lot of educators, we're doing our best, we can always do better. And tonight we're here to listen from the perspectives of Ron and Richard here, and we're going to take their stories, their perspectives, and use that as we plan going forward for the next school year. So really I want to thank Ron and Richard for joining. So no further ado, Katherine and I want to welcome you guys and go ahead and take a second to introduce yourselves.
First of all, your intro, we just want to listen. Wow, that's emotional. Thank you. And if we all felt like that, we probably wouldn't be in this situation. Anyway, my name is Ron Jenkins. I'm a former correctional officer and counselor with Department of Juvenile Justice. I worked 30 years, beginning at Fresno County Juvenile Hall and then transferring to the state of California, in which I just ended my career 2 years ago. I went to Fresno State. I have my BA degree in social work. I am currently a mentor in the Los Angeles area for youth. I volunteer for a program that's in the Hawthorne School District, ran out of Hawthorne Middle School, called Love for Life. It's a social and emotional stability program. There's a 12-week curriculum. We focus on things like responsibility, resiliency, self-care, love, problem solving, those kind of things. And I just want to say I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Adam. And hopefully we can shine some light on this situation that's going on around the world. It's an everybody's problem. It's not one specific person or even group of people. We all need to come together on this and find common ground. To me, it's a matter of the heart. To me, it's a matter of the heart. I guess that's the social work in me. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Richard.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Well, first of all, I want to say shout out to you educators, man. You guys are the hardest working people in America and the most underpaid people in America. And, the one thing that I always, been an advocate of and fighting for, first and foremost, is, since our schools are funded on property taxes, and, we have low income neighborhoods, and then we have richer neighborhoods, they get all the funding. And you guys are solely based on property taxes, but a little bit of government help. we got to get together and make sure we flip that on its head and make sure that the government comes in and give you guys the tax dollars that you need to compare you to the rich white neighborhoods. Because there's always like two Americas when it comes to education. You got underfunded black and brown, and you got the suburbia, which is rich and white. And as long as we have education or education injustice in this country, we're always going to have civil injustice in this country, criminal injustice in this country. So it really starts with you guys. I just wanted to thank you guys for doing the work. So anyway, I am, I already said my name, but I'm the author of a book called Dad at 14. I actually had a son at 14, and the mother dropped him off on my doorstep. I had to raise him myself. And I didn't have a father myself, but I want to break that cycle. 74% of homes are led by, women in our community, in Black. I think in Hispanics, it's a lot lower. And the only race that's within the earshot of us is the American Indian. That's 54%. So we are leading in single parent homes. So I kind of want to write this book to encourage the men who are not engaged with their kids, young fathers, which is a lot of them out there that are scared about being a father, to encourage them to step up because the children are our future. Also, I am the creator of Kingdomhood Conversation, and also creator of a Real Men, Real Fathers network that support boys and men. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Thank you for introducing yourself to our audience. Again, this is definitely I've been really thinking hard the last few weeks of how we can support the what's needed here, and we're really grateful that you guys are here sharing your stories. I was gonna, before I turn it over to you guys, just want to, I'm really happy here that I was able to reach out to Ron. I mean, I've known Ron since I was 5 years old.
Yep.
And man, I have so many memories of Ron, in the locker room, and all the athletes out there. You guys are like superheroes to me growing up. I think I said on Facebook today that it was the best way to grow up with all these great athletes out there at Fresno State. And I just wanted to be all you guys. I always had the affinity for the wide receivers for some reason. Those are my guys. And Ron, you were one of them, and definitely a huge part of my childhood. So I want to thank you for inspiring me growing up as a kid. So glad to have you. And you know what? That's enough for me talking. It's time for us to listen.
Yeah.
The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Okay. Go ahead, Rich.
Oh, wow. Where do I start? Well, look, the state of America. But see, this is the thing is that, we can, of course, most noticeable, George Floyd is what really thrusted Black consciousness into every American household. We saw him basically be assassinated, by a rogue cop. But, and it caused this rioting and everything we going on. And, the one thing that I see about this that's been very transformational about this one event is this is the first time, look, we've had 85 riots since 1955 based on some type of civil injustice or something like that. And Black and brown men are still getting shot down in the street. So rioting itself hasn't really changed anything. But this is the first time I've seen a multicultural movement where based on something that happened with a Black man. Now, of course, you had whites and you had Latinos, that marched with King, of course. But this has been an eye-opener and it pretty much a surprise to me of how you're seeing, white people out there with BLM signs, holding up Black Power fists and things like that. So I think that America has definitely wow. But you know how America is, they're slow to move. Because this has actually been happening since 1704. Because just kind of walk back a little bit, is police were created to catch slaves. They were called the Slave Patrol, and they had three main purposes as far as keeping the Black slaves in line, and that was obvious. But you know how America is, they're slow to move. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that repeating? I'm sorry. It is repeating. I'm sorry about that. So anyway, they're slow to move. So anyway. The main reason the police department was created was to obviously catch slaves, obviously. Second one was to strike fear and terror in the slave to keep the slave from uprising. Because during slavery, there were 250 slave revolts. So we weren't just sitting around saying we shall overcome. Black folks have always fought back, from being enslaved by the Spaniards all the way up to being enslaved by the by European. You know, they got Toussaint Louverture, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Presser that led these slave revolts. So they were always afraid. So that's why the police were created, to strike terror, to kill our will, to revolt, apprehend slaves, and also oppose the law that the states had put on Black Americans. So the history of the police has been to terrorize the Black community since they were actually policing as we know it, starting in 1704. Prior to that, there was other policing. They were just day watch and night watch volunteers. But policing as we know it was created in 1704. So ever since they were founded, this is what they were to do. So we're talking 175 years to 20 years that they've been here to terrorize Black people. That's what they do. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying all cops are bad. We're talking about a system. Okay, I'm not talking about individuals, we're talking about a system. So then you get, like, of course, after the Emancipation Proclamation, what Lincoln does, he doesn't free us, he gives us liberty. Liberty simply means to free from bondage. So what he does, he transfers the power from the individual to the states. And then they start statewide prisons. Because there were no statewide prisons prior to 1865. So then you have the policing system that are now state militarized. And then you have state prisons that once we're emancipated, they come up with the Black Code, start throwing all Black people in jail for vagrancy laws, trying to leave your job, being out too late. So when you look at the justice system from a Black African-American standpoint, from its foundation, it's been to terrorize us, beat, murder, and keep us locked up and keep us suppressed in a white America. So that's kind of like the history. And then you go through 80 years of Jim Crow, then you go through mass incarceration, and here we are. So this is nothing new for Black America. We've been dealing with this. Like, you know, I was coming up in the 80s and 90s. The only difference between now and the 80s and 90s is it's just getting filmed. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
In my neighborhood, I saw a cop run over a Black dude and keep going. So we've been dealing with this in my lifetime. You know, I'm 50, so in my lifetime, but you're talking 35 years. You know, the first time I was pulled over by a cop, I was 8 years old. And, you know, they were looking for some gang member in my neighborhood. I grew up in Inglewood. And he came and said, put your hand on the car and don't move it. Don't move. And I moved a little bit and he, you know, elbowed me in the rib. I'm 8. So this is my experience with police since a kid. And so this is kind of our outlook. So I just want to, and the reason why I took it through this brief history lesson, because I want to give your audience the context of why we have such tension between the police and Black America, because they pretty much been paramilitary occupying police forces. They haven't, for white people, it's been good neighbors, protect and serve. You know, the cop, you know, he sees Mikey, Johnny, or Kimmy. Hello, how you guys doing? How are your parents? Oh, we're good. We went bungee jumping this weekend. With Black folks, they see us. It's like, oh, he's a suspect. Is he a gang member? What are you gang affiliated? Or where are you from? Or why are you here? Are you on probation? Or are you on parole? So it's a different relationship. So I just kind of want to create that context so you guys know where we're coming from as we moving forward. And again, we're talking about a system, not individuals. Right.
Well, just to add to that, African Americans are stopped 30% more than whites. Mm-hmm. There's 3 times more arrests, and there's 3 times more convictions than there are than our white counterparts. I just want to go back to being that Richard brought up the history of policing. I want to go back to the arrest. I want to go back to that day. Sad day. I didn't want to do this because the man has been laid to peace, but I want to add my expertise here. So we're in this situation with Mr. Floyd, and from where we as viewers pick it up, Mr. Floyd is laid out prone on the ground with his hands behind his back, assumingly handcuffed. I want to talk about force options and what led up to that. So in policing, there's a such thing called force options. And force options are tools or a process in which police has to go through to control or contain a situation. And the number one is reputation and appearance. Just you as an officer in uniform, you know, that gets attention in itself. The next step is dialogue. Dialogue is to communicate, to diffuse a situation and bring it under control. Now, keep in mind, in between these steps, as an officer, you're always looking for escalation, never de-escalation. It's a mindset. So you go from reputation appearance to dialogue, and then the next step, if that's not working and the subject becomes a threat, then you go into what we call your chemical mace, taser, and things like that. And then from that, you go into what we call mechanical restraints, which is handcuffs, leg irons, the plastic things that they use for the looters and rioters. And then you go into what we call less lethal, which be your projectiles, the tear gas. And then we go into our last phase, which is lethal, meaning your life is in danger. Therefore, using lethal option is there. But in this situation, first of all, Mr. Floyd, in that position is the position that we want. We want our subject to be in the most vulnerable position that they could possibly be in. And what's more vulnerable than being proned out on the ground in handcuffs? This gentleman failed miserably. He failed the department. He failed his fellow officers because now they have to answer to murder charges, something that they did not do and something that they did not think about. And that's the sad part. I don't believe that this department trained that way. No department in the world trains to put a knee on the neck of anybody. But it's far more seen in instances when police officers come in contact with Black subjects. That's the most disturbing thing to me, having been an officer, having been in situations where I've had to help physically restrain someone and bring them under control. And as an officer, you're in the mindset of pain compliance. That's why they do the wrist locks. It's called pain compliance. And in this case, Mr. Chauvin, Officer Chauvin, went too far in his process. And I'm not going to even say that he set out to kill this gentleman, Mr. Floyd. However, I do know this. Every year, officers are trained in tactical situations, arrest procedures, force options, given instructions, and they're told there's levels and you're always checking in. But once you gain control of a subject, at that point, it's hands off. And that didn't happen in this scenario. And that bothers me as a retired law enforcement officer, because as you can see, Mr. Chauvin is not the only one being blamed. Chauvin, he's not the only one being blamed. Every police in America is being blamed, and that's simply not the case. There are good policing out there. There's good cops out there. There are cops out there who care, much like teachers who get into their profession because they care. And there are cops out there that do care. And I just want to make that clear. However, there are cops like this, and it appears that these type of cops only show up when there's engagements with African-American men. And somehow we have to get to the bottom of that. And we have to find out why it continues to occur. And it's easy to say racism. I just want to pose the question. How many agree that it's based on racism?
I think maybe it's classism too. I think, I think that it's not solely based on race, because you have upper class Black neighborhoods that don't have this problem. So in the lower income neighborhoods where the communities are more active, you tend to see a lot of stuff take place like this. So I don't know if it's solely based on race, but I do believe there's a race component in there.
Right.
But I don't think it's solely based on race. I think, I think everything happens in social context, just like, housing discrimination or voter suppression. And, I don't think these officers wake up every once and say, I'm gonna see if I can go out and kill a Black man. When the opportunity presents itself, it seems to happen.
It's not so much the idea of going out and killing a Black man.
Right.
It's all those perceptions.
Yeah.
About who we are, as being angry, as being aggressive, as being someone that causes or presents a threat. I heard that Mr. Floyd and Mr. Chauvin knew each other.
Yeah.
This was someone that was extremely close to them. She was the manager of a club that both Chauvin and Floyd worked.
Right.
And she clearly said that Mr. Chauvin was afraid of Black men. She heard that in a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So why are they afraid of African American men? Why are you afraid of me? I don't want you to be afraid of me. I want you to recognize that there's a difference only in color, but not in who I am. And if you tell me you don't see color, then let's remove all the crayons, because there are colors.
Yeah.
But don't judge me based on my color. Judge me based on my character. Judge me based on how I treat you. Judge me based on how I treat others. And that's basically how I view, our world. I deal with people accordingly, how they deal me. When you bring in the word systemic racism, I understand that, but that's on a level that we can't even, and I feel like we can't even touch. You're talking about economic structures now. You're talking about these Bank of Americas, these big companies that deal with a lot of money. So when you bring up the term systemic racism, I think that's where that term fits more so than the world that I live in. Now, of course, there are stereotypes, and things like that, in which people from stereotypes, they gain a thought process about, a particular race. I think we've all had some kind of, thoughts in our head about racism, what it looks like. And we've even asked ourselves and questioned ourselves, am I a racist? Well, I'm going to just say it right now. As a child growing up in foster care, some of my worst experiences were with people of my color. And
Right.
some of my best experiences were with white people, So that gives me a totally different perspective. However, I'm not dumb. I have eyes. I can see, things that's going on. And I'll just say this. The first time that I ever experienced direct racism as it associates with hatred was my first week at Fresno State. There were KKKs rallying in front of Fashion Fair, the mall. And I witnessed this, and I knew about the history of our country, and I knew that the KKK was behind a lot of horrible acts against our culture, our African American culture. But it really didn't affect me it didn't affect me like I've heard people who were raised in the 60s, the 50s, and the 40s, how it affects them. I knew to stay clear, but at the same time, it didn't affect me to a point in which I was afraid, So that's kind of my perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I want to interject just on a few things that I heard you guys say. Going back to Ron's point, talking about your experience in Fresno with the KKK. So here in the Valley, it has been a hotbed for the KKK for as long as I've lived here. I remember when we first moved here, and I think I was like 3 or 4 years old in Clovis, where I grew up, seeing guys in hoods in the back of a pickup truck, waving the Confederate flag, and looking at that, and like I thought, why are those guys dressed up like that? My mom didn't know how to explain it to me, but I remember thinking about it later. You've seen that, and I remember the incident, being reported. My dad told me about it from Fashion Fair. But going back to what Richard said earlier, and I know the point you talked about how the police force was kind of born out of the slave catchers. From a history teacher's perspective here, one of our 8th grade history standards here in California, the Black Codes and I'm sorry, besides the Black Codes, but also the Fugitive Slave Act is a standard that I've had to teach for years.
Yeah.
And until I spoke to you guys the other day, you told me about that. And you said it again tonight. I was unaware of that. I have a degree in history, and I was unaware of that connection. So what does that say about the education that I got with the history degree? And that's something definitely when I plan with my 8th grade history teachers next year, this is something you need to really touch on. How can you do better? Here's something that we can begin planting those seeds of understanding with our students. So I want to thank you guys for bringing up those two great points.
Right. I'll just say this. So I had, Richard, I want you to take this after this. I'm going to just say this. I had the basic, history education on African Americans, slavery, and all those horrible things that went along with slavery. And then probably the closest I've come to really fully understanding what slavery meant was when the movie Roots came out, with LeVar Burton. That was probably the closest I got to that time in our history from an emotional standpoint, And they've always taught up right up to what, Martin Luther King, Richard? They've taught up to Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Not even a lot on Malcolm X, or some of our other great Black leaders. But, and then when I got to Fresno State, the Black students was like, are you going to take Black studies? I was like, Black studies? What is, why would I want to study myself? What is Black studies? Yeah. And so I ended up taking Black studies, because a lot of the athletes took it. It was a great teacher that was teaching the class. And from that experience, I really got an in-depth look at what history meant to African-American people. It was broken down, in time frames, much like what Mr. Richard, just did with his history on African-Americans. But I think the problem is you teach about African-American history. You teach it in a way to say that this is what happened, but you don't teach it in a way that says this should have not happened, or get down to the nitty-gritty in terms of like the emotional impact and the psychological impact that it's had on the African-American culture. How do you do that? I don't know. It needs to be instilled into the curriculum as well. I think the common denominator between us as people is tapping into our emotions, and I believe that we make changes when we reach emotional points, like Richard said earlier, what's going on in our world like now. I mean, people are coming together I do photography, so I was out doing the riots in LA, and I've been a part of 3 riots, and this is the first time that I've stepped out of my house and said, I'm going to go out here. I went out there for photography, but I gained a different experience seeing these people out here who have pride for our community, pride for themselves as African Americans. And I'm going to just talk about this one scenario, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Richard. So I'm out, and this rally is just about to start, and I end up in the middle of it because I wanted to see exactly what was going on inside these rallies, you know. And I'll just give you an example. The core, the middle, these are people whose lives have already been touched by police brutality, either brutality itself or their loved ones have perished in the hands of an officer. So that's the core of it. And then the outside of those, then you have all the advocates, those people who stand up for the rights of African Americans and all Americans. And then outside of that, you have just the general public, the sign holders, those people who have strong convictions, but they don't have a voice and they're holding those signs. And then outside of that, you have and what touched me was the amount of young boys and young girls, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, who are outside of these circles watching this and experiencing it and getting this warped understanding of what our country is really about. Because if you don't have anybody to explain to you the other side, then as a young kid, you're seeing all this and you are interpreting it as the police are bad, the police want to kill me, the police want to hurt me. I actually heard there was a story of a young girl who was out protesting and the police passed her and she broke down in tears and she got afraid because in her mind, police are bad. And that's not what these rallies are all about. Yes, you get the looting and you get those individuals who do that. I mean, these are the same kids that are in classrooms, except now each kid from each classroom is all in one place, out of control, looting, being mischievous, committing deviant acts, you know. So I just wanted to give a little example of what this rioting is all about. And I'm gonna just say this too. The news, the media, they want to reflect on, you know, the negatives that's going on. I mean, we hardly even hear about the protests. They give you a little bit about the protests, and then they show you the rioting, people running out of the stores with clothing, the fire vehicles, you know, just all the mayhem that's going on. Well, unfortunately, we control the information that we receive. And if I haven't watched TV probably in 4 or 5 days because I being out there and for the first time in my life, I truly got an understanding of what's going on out there. And there are some people who are really, really passionate about making changes in our country. And it's not just African Americans. There were white people, there were Asian people, there were Hispanic people. As a matter of fact, I thought I saw more Hispanics than I seen blacks. And that's huge. That is huge for California, because there was a time when there was sort of a conversation of how are we going to get along with the migration of the Mexican and Hispanic population. And if you ask me, they're doing a great job. And I even heard a message the other day that says, if we as African Americans and Hispanics can bond together, then we can actually take this thing over and get people in office that's going to make changes. Richard?
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. I'm I guess slightly controversial here for a minute and just look at racism. And, you know, when I think about racism, the one thing that I always say is that white people are the only race that's empowered to be racist. The rest of us, we can be bigoted and we can be prejudiced. We can't be racist. So this is what I mean. Like, for example, like Andrew could say, I don't like black people. That's fine. That doesn't make him racist. That makes him a bigot. Racism is you have judicial power or you have a legal apparatus to stop me from pursuing happiness.
Wow.
Jim Crow is racism. Not me saying I don't like Latino people or stuff. I had this one KK guy said, I don't like the ends. I said, that's fine. You don't have to like me. There's no law saying you have to like me. But see, the thing is, to be racist, you have to have a financial power backing it. So if white people own 85% of America's wealth and they create the systems, they are empowered to be racist. When black people were freed in 1865, we own 1/2 of 1% of America's wealth. In 2020, we own 1/2 of 1% of America's wealth. And Latinos are somewhere around that same area. So you and me as a black man and you as being Latino are not empowered to be racist. We can be bigoted and be prejudiced. You say, I don't like black people. I don't trust black people. I think all black people are gang members. I think all black people are thieves. That's prejudice. That's a conceit based on without really knowing the person. But you cannot stop me. You cannot create a system of racism that can stop me from getting a job, stop me from living somewhere I want to live, stop me from voting, stop me just from living in society. So white people are the only ones that are empowered to do that. They create the system. Now, we need to burn this system of implicit and explicit bias to the ground. De jure segregation, de facto segregation needs to be burnt to the ground. But white people have to light the fire. Then black and brown people can come behind them and fan the flame. But they have to do it. So I just want to say, so when I hear like the Latino guy saying he's racist, I've been called racist because I don't like racist white people. How am I racist? I've been fighting against racism my whole life. You know what I mean? So I can't stop a white man from getting a job. I can't stop him from living in a certain neighborhood. I can't stop him from voting. I can't kill a white man with absolute impunity and not be charged. I don't have that power. So, and look, bigotry and prejudice is not our Achilles heel. Racism is the black man's kryptonite. So if you look at our education system, so education systems are grounded in society that they're built within, right? So our education system was built for white people, even though the education system was financed, paid for, bought for by the slave trade. Because the black people were brought here for two reasons: textile in the north and pick cotton in the south. We were not brought here to be educators or get into the mainstream of society or even be citizens. Because even after the 14th Amendment was ratified in 65, or was passed in 65, it wasn't ratified until 68. So we were just sitting around here, we were just residents. Well, they never intended for black people to be in this country. So, but the problem is when we were freed, you had 4 million black folks that the white collective didn't know what to do with. They couldn't send us back to Africa because slavery psychologically disconnected us from our homeland. And I say this all the time: black people are the only people in this country that don't have a homeland. You got Chinese that have China. You got, Arabs that have some part in the Arab world. You have Latinos that may have somewhere in South or Central America. We don't have a homeland to back us up. Now, among other reasons is, Ron had mentioned earlier about fear. Fear goes way back since we were free. Ever since we were, well, actually, let me take it back. Even when we were slaves, they had a fear of us because of the slave revolts. And then after the emancipation, the proclamation, and you saw Reconstruction and black people started to grow and go and get to the mainstream of society, a fear came. So that's why they came and they ended Reconstruction. And then you got 80 years of Jim Crow and the lynchings and the KKK. It's all based on fear. I don't know how you legislate that. I don't know how you can pass all the laws you want. Look, we got 55 Brown Board of Education. And some would argue that we're more segregated now than we were before we tried to desegregate. Because people are going to resist laws. So it's really going to take this human element of us to lay down the fear that you feel you see a black man, you got to be afraid of him for whatever reason. There's a bunch of reasons why they're afraid. I mean, if you look back in the early 19th century, it was because when we started to, when Reconstruction was in the midst, we were able to buy land and we were able to get and start businesses and we were able to, just be able to be a part of the mainstream. We got our citizenship, everything like that. And then you have the white power base because America was controlled by a plutocracy, 5 controlling families. They said, well, if you allow these black people to get in the mainstream, they're gonna take your women, they're gonna impregnate your daughters, they're gonna take your home, take your jobs, they're gonna put you into slavery because they're gonna do to you what you did to them, which is a big reason of fear, because they're afraid that black people get in power, we're gonna return the favor. But we're not, because that's not how we're wired. We just want to live and let's leave us the hell alone. Allow us to live in this constitutional democracy without fear of racism, without fear of classism, without fear of any type of prejudice. And that's all we're looking for. But if they keep pushing, then we'll be looking for revenge. But that's where the history of fear came from. It came from black people becoming in power and returning the favor to white people. So ever since that time, they've been trying to kill us.
Wow, that's deep, Richard. That's great information, though. Adam, were you going to say something?
Katherine was.
I was just going to say, I can't help but think that there's so much discrepancy in suspension rates. In the Black Americans are, always, such a higher rate of suspensions in schools than certainly than whites. And, I wonder if we're just like perpetuating the system, so to speak, in that way. And I'm also wondering, I liked what you said about it's hard to legislate, because we had a question on Facebook here about, well, are our pre-service teachers learning this stuff? Are they actually learning that there's systemic racism? Are they learning about this and about the history? And I think in California, we have Tony Thurmond, our state superintendent of schools, that has said he's going to really work with the education system and the teachers and such. But at the same time, like you said, it's interesting. You can legislate whatever you want, but it's about the heart. So you have a lot of educators that listen. And what would you say to them? What is our role as educators? How can we do all we can to break this cycle?
Well, I think that it takes, when you look at the education system, right? And I think, I was looking at this, 97% of administrators are something other than Black or Latino, and you got 84% of teachers are white, middle-class women. So when you look at a young Black and brown boy, and he has this aggressive behavior, maybe because his father's not in the home, maybe we have other challenges. And then like you said, you get them, they're 3 times more likely to be suspended. And then we get into this school to prison pipeline thing, which is created for Black and brown people. I think they just have to, it's really hard, but I think they really have to understand the culture and try to understand that, if you have a Black and brown kid, he's going to have a different experience in life and more challenges than a white kid. So he may behave different. So there's 2 things to this. Like, I looked at, having a grandson that's autistic and being a mentor, to a kid who's dyslexic. You're looking at the system. So you look at 1980, right? When they came with ADD. And then 87, they came with ADHD. So they put the hyper on it, right? And I was looking at this, and just from my own experience, it's like, this is how the education system has kind of failed Black and brown people. So there's several ways to treat this ADHD. I mean, there's counseling and some type of, programs that they help. But one of the things they give them drugs, whether it's, I think it's Confederin, and there's a couple of them, Dicerna, and there's a couple of drugs they give these kids. Well, the DEA classified these as category 2 drugs. So in 87, they're taking our kids and putting them in special ed, which really became a trash can for kids they didn't want to deal with.
When you say our kids, you mean African-American kids?
And brown kids too.
Okay. And
brown kids too. And they put them in special ed because, the standardized testing, which is another bias thing, the way they craft the questions is that maybe black and brown kids don't respond that way. And they are not doing well on these bias tests. There's been plenty of studies saying these tests are biased. But anyway, that's another argument. And then they put these kids in special ed and they put them in this protection house, this trash can, so they can keep their numbers up for the standardized tests so they can get federal funding. Then meanwhile, our kids are getting these labels. So at the same time in 87 that they're giving kids these type 2 drugs is one of the ways they're treating ADHD. They're locking up Black and brown men for selling type 2 drugs, cocaine, and all this type of stuff. So we can, as educators and teachers, what I would recommend definitely is when you're experiencing, if you're a white middle-aged woman, and you have a black or brown child, don't be so quick if he's aggressive, send him to the principal or suspend him, but try to understand a little bit more about this kid so you can protect them. Teachers are supposed to be protectors. You don't need to be, and I understand you don't have to be a probation or warrant officer all the time, because you got with schools in the city, there's a lot of kids in the class. Teachers, don't have a lot of support. They don't have a lot of money. I totally understand it. So it's difficult. It's easier said than done. I'm not a teacher. I'm not dealing with what you guys are doing. But what I would definitely ask, just looking at the history of education and how we're doing things now, we have to try to add a little bit of have a little patience with our children. And again, too, let me say this real quick. The most important education is in the home. And I see a lot of the parents are not doing their part. And they expect you guys to do everything. And that's wrong. Because the best education you're going to get is at home. Because at home, you get the life experience. In school, it's all theoretical.
Right. At home, you get the discipline.
Yeah.
You have the discipline when you step into school, that you have a far better chance of learning, unless there's some issues, with learning disabilities and things like that. But I want to pose this question to you guys, Adam. How much do you think ACE scores play in how we view our children?
Can you tell what scores?
ACE scores, the scores where you look at a kid's traumas, his childhood traumas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Like when you guys do their IEPs or their, and you find out about these things about their past and their history and stuff like that. How much does that play into how the entire school deals with a student? Because
it's a really good question. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have a kid who's coming into your school and his ACE scores prove that he's had all these traumatic, situations and experiences in his life, so that means there's already a attitude or a mindset towards this kid. So soon as little Johnny does something wrong, you don't excuse it, but you don't do anything to support it either. Little Johnny has problems. He's been here. He's a foster kid. He was in abuse, this, that, these things. And you just kind of let the kid be, and this is the kid that's looting, because nobody in the educational system, and like Richard said, nobody at home addressed these issues early on. And Richard brought up the medication thing. Well, like I said, I'm on the social work side of things. I've seen where medication makes a huge, huge, huge difference. It's kind of like, and I will say this, in the Black communities, we don't like the word medication to be brought up, especially when you're talking about our children. That's like throwing a knife at us. And it's an emotional reaction when you say, your kid may be suffering from, whatever these things are, and maybe, medicate. No, we don't want to hear that, because we think that white people are crazy and we're not, and we don't need these things. That's crazy. That's hideous. Yeah, so right. Here we are evaluating your kid, and we're telling you that, maybe you need to look into other options, and you're not. So, like, again, it starts at home. That's the fault of the parent. But I just want to go back to what you talked about earlier, Richard. This thing, and I believe the root of evil is money.
Yeah.
And if you go back to why we were brought here in the first place, was to crop the fields, to produce, bartering and trading was out, currency came into play. So now they needed somebody to work the fields to prepare, to make money. So, and that's the part that creates the systemic racism to this whole deal here. It's about money. It's about power.
Yeah.
And I was having a conversation with some of my buddies the other day, and we were all African American. And one brother brought up the point. He said, look, if it was reversed, it'd be the same way.
Mhm.
If it was reversed, it'd be the same way.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, we all need to look in the mirror. We all need to evaluate who we are. And those of you who know or think or feel like you have some unsupportive thoughts towards children, African American, Hispanic, Asian, white, black, as an educator, you need to check yourself, because how can you as a teacher or even be on a school campus and have biases towards those students or any student, any race that's on your campus? I relate that to, go ahead.
Oh, I want to do because you asked us a question about the ACE scores and what we think the school systems, how we take that.
We probably have different answers. So
yeah,
I'd like to hear yours first.
I think overall in general we don't do a very good job of that. I do want to commend my district where I work. We are in the last few years we are doing a much better job at that. I am so much more aware in the last few years of my students who are dealing with those issues. We have an army of counselors, more than I've ever seen before, probably much higher proportion to our school size. You see the army of counselors we have, it's more proportional to a much larger school than the size we have. And they are in constant contact with all the teachers on their caseloads, and more than I've ever seen before. And I really want to commend my district for having that vision, and because we deal with a lot of poverty. It's not over 95% Hispanic, a lot of poverty, gang issues. It's very rural, and we have a lot of these issues with kids. Their needs aren't being met. They're falling between the cracks, and I really want to commend them for having that vision. I know where I work, this is a microcosm, but when we look at the big picture, there's tons of room for improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I was just going to answer the question as well. So with the ACEs, for me, I did not, my first year teaching, I found out from a social worker some of the ACEs that my kids were going through, and that helped so much. Once I knew where their background was, I understood why they were acting out. I understood why there's so much trauma that they're reliving and all of this. And so it was, and I of course asked, I'm a first year teacher. I don't know. I didn't grown up in this community. So I asked, the social worker was so helpful to me in giving me these strategies to support and not to just suspend, right? Many people would say, oh, well, this kid did this, you should immediately suspend it. But I thought there's got to be something else here. But I think I like what both of you said about understanding the background and then supporting rather than immediately, judging. So
right. I think, well, the bigger picture to this is maybe this type of training needs to be implemented within the training that you guys get for curriculum and all those other things that you get training for. Maybe there needs to be a portion of training that introduces you to the ACE score program and have a conversation with a social worker who trains you guys on how to recognize these things. And also the biggest thing is not only recognizing when you have kids who are struggling with either learning disabilities or mental health issues, but a referral system in place, because when my son was in elementary school, I volunteered at his school 2 days a week when I was off during the week. So I volunteered at his school 2 days a week. And during that time, I would just do 4 hours. I was there so much the principal told me, hey, why don't you go down and apply for a position here so we can save the money in our budget next year. And I did. So anyway, I would see kids that had problems in the classroom and they would get walked to the office. And I saw this going on all the time. you know. And so I went in the office one day and I saw these kids sitting here and I started asking, I was like, why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Why are you here? Some of them were there for legitimate reasons, but most of them were there was because they got kicked out of class. So they were just sitting here doing absolutely nothing, just sitting there. So I went to the principal and I said, hey, why are these kids out here sitting in the office? They've, been sent to the office from class because of behavior issues, but there's nobody out here talking to them or trying to find out what's going on. I said, why don't you allow me to take each kid? I'll talk with the teacher, ask what happened. If it was a confrontation with two kids, I would intervene in that situation and try to get these kids back in the class so they're learning and not sitting in the office for 3 or 4 hours. So from my personal experience, I think that would be something that would help, in terms of dealing with these kids. In the correctional facility, we have these issues, and what happens is the teacher will call security. Security comes to the class, and they pick the kid up, and they take him to, it's called office study. But in office study, his work goes with him, and there's a teacher's aide in office study, and the kid takes his work with him, and he has to complete that work for that period in that classroom. Then the teacher gets the work back. What it creates is a system that's supporting the kid all the way through the process. And when at the point that he becomes a behavior problem, we're not just saying, okay, we're done with you, which is not providing the service that we say we're providing, which is to educate the kid, Now, there are extreme situations, when kids fight and they're really, really upset, and you got to get those kids calm, to intervene in those situations. But in general, for minor behavior infractions and things like that, I think as a system, we need to be more cognizant of, we call it continuum of care. That's what we call it. So he's in the classroom, okay, he has a situation, challenging situation. So now what do we do with him? Do we just kick him out of class and he's sitting in the office for 4 hours or 3 hours? Or when he gets kicked out of class, have we created a support system that supports this as well? And I thought it worked really well. Now, we weren't like that before. This came about with the federal lawsuit that challenged all the things that we did in terms of mental health education, treatment services, and things like that. Before, what happened was the kid would get kicked out of school at 8 o'clock in the morning and he wouldn't see school for a week or two. But then when we went to this system, our graduation rate improved, our ability to intervene in these problems and solve them improved. And ultimately what we want is the kid to be educated and for this kid to be put in the position to where he can successfully pass to the next grade as a better student. So those are some things that I've seen in my past that I've seen it. If it works in a correctional facility, I know it'll work on a school campus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure you've walked through some offices where there's some that, there's more kids sitting there waiting to see the principal than others. And it's kind of it's part of it's a cultural thing and the teachers, but it's also, the culture of the school and what is, what they've been, but I think it's also like you're saying, it's about the training. If I as a teacher don't know what to do when that behavior occurs, and behavior is all communication. That's all it is. It's communication. So if I don't know what to do because I've either always done it this way or no one trained me or, then really, I like what you said. It's really all about that training.
It goes back to this is like, and this is like just a matters of pedagogy and curriculum. It's the same way it's the same issue with dealing with kids who teachers don't know what to do with, is that I'm going to treat, the way I teach and the way I deal with kids. Well, this is how my experience was. This is the system that I know is normal. So I'm going to, if it worked for me, it's good for them too. and that could not be further from the truth. And that's that right there is this stigma that just needs to be just sent off to oblivion.
Well, here's the thing is that, well, why would I worry about one kid when I got 34 others who are willing to learn, or 30 others who are willing to learn? Well, because that one kid who you're being budgeted for, who deserves an opportunity to learn, and if he's in a part of your system, then you need to create avenues for success based on the history of the system and the history of problems that you've had. Somebody needs to stand up and say, okay, so we need to find a solution to providing what we say we're providing, educational services to our kids. Even those kids that fall into the category of hard to deal with or behavior problems, we still need to provide educational services. And if we need to create a team of teachers or a behavior modification class where you have a school social worker or a psychologist working along with the teacher to deal with these kids, those kids are always going to fall through the cracks, and they're always going to be the ones that don't get the help that they need, both on an emotional and educational level. And those are our kids that end up in correctional facilities, such as the one that I worked in. And as a system, as a school system, and along with parenting, these issues in this day and time need to be addressed, or we are not doing our complete job. We're not doing our complete job. We have a responsibility to these kids as well. Yes, we do have a responsibility to the 34 others, but there's one or two kids that we're missing the point on. Something needs to be done about that. Because if it's two in 5 classes, come on, that's a lot of kids. And we got 10 kids that are not receiving educational services, and they're falling behind. So that would be something that I personally would like to see done. And I'm going to just go on this personal experience thing. So I was a foster youth. My mom died, and I went into a foster home. And now looking back, I see how that set me back. And when I was in elementary school, I was in special ed. And we would come to class, and it was me and whatever other students fell into that special ed deal. We would be taught by a teacher's aide in the back of the class. And basically, it was her job to catch us up to where all the other students were. So we got that special attention that we needed. And it made a tremendous difference in my life, as a kid, looking back on it, because we had that specific attention, which is what we needed to catch up, because I'm sure my A score was off the chart. They should have just gave up on me, all the stuff that I had been through, as a foster kid. And thinking back on it and having this conversation, I can honestly say that was pivotal in my educational success, all the way through elementary school. Thinking about that now, yeah. And is that something that they have on campus where you guys are?
We have those sports where I work, and I mean, most schools have it, but as I said earlier, it's not as widespread as it should be. It's a much bigger need, and definitely it's something that we definitely need to consider going forward.
Right. I mean, if you're in the business of educating kids, then you got to cover all bases. You can't. There can't be any holes in the program. You can't make an excuse and say, well, we didn't extend our services beyond him being a behavioral problem. If they're doing it in the prisons, why can't they do it in the schools? If they did it in the schools, then we might not need the prisons.
Yeah.
So, we're getting toward the end right here. Before we wrap up, I wanna give the floor back to Richard before we call it a night. You go ahead and Richard, go ahead and just chime in with anything that's been on your mind you want to kind of close us out with.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know if this is possible for teachers, but I mean, dealing with kids from the inner city with behavior issues, I think they have counselors, right? Guiding counselors that the kids may talk to. That has to reflect the demographics of must. You can't have a kid from the inner city going talking to a white person, because there's going to be not anything miscellaneous, malicious, or they don't care. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying is, when you have a kid that comes out of a certain environment and has a certain paradigm, the world, he has to be able to look across that table and believe in the belief that the person that's talking to him relates to his situation. He has to. Otherwise, because I'm telling you from personal experience, when I was in school, in middle school, all my teachers were white. So finally, I was having so much trouble and stuff. They got a black counselor to come away from another district to talk to me, and it made a huge difference. He said, "Man, I understand what you're going through. I understand where you're at. I understand why you're angry. I was there. My dad was this. I grew up in this neighborhood," and we clicked just like that. And that made a world of difference. But a white woman or a white man that grew up in the suburbs don't have a clue what I'm dealing with. They don't have a clue. They grew up in suburbia, in Mayberry.
That's a good point.
So we're from two different worlds. So that'll definitely, I think, help help curb the behavior when you have, black kids, or even, of course, brown kids as well, and helping them kind of get back on the right track.
Right. Just to piggyback on that, before COVID came and school was in, my sister's daughter goes to a private school, and the principal actually called me and asked me would I come in and address some of the African American kids who he was having problems with on campus. And what impressed me the most about that was that he was willing to ask. Now, some people may say, well, why is it that you can't deal with this group of kids? I say, exhaust all options when dealing with these kids. And he called me in to have a conversation with these kids. And like Richard said, we sat in a group. It was about 20 of them. Not all of them were behavior problems, but some of them were. And I was able to sit there, go around the room, find out who the players were, who the shot callers were, who was causing all the problems, and just build. I did some team building amongst them. I talked about being accountable for one another, what a real friend is, having someone, or even being a self-advocate in terms of having someone on campus that you can go to and explain your feelings to if you're having a bad day. When you get to school and you're not feeling well and things are not going right, who can you go to on this campus that could help you get through the day? And I even told him, if you have a best friend here, tell your best friend things are not going well for you today. And I created a scenario in which I had them repeat, "I got your back, I got your back." And it was basically to promote them supporting one another. But I made a point to also find out a trusted soul on that campus, somebody that they could go talk to. And I explained to them that in the end, you're losing because you're getting in trouble, you're getting expelled. Now you're getting in trouble with your parents, and it's just not a good situation to be in. So you're right, Richard. They do need someone else, someone that looks like them, somebody that reflects their feelings, somebody that reflects their pain, somebody that reflects their life. That's impossible to do, but at least there needs to be an effort made by that school.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's something we can advocate though for and speak out, because
Right.
It's true. I mean, it's difficult to relate. Like you said, people want to say, "Oh, you get me."
Yeah, right.
I love that. Yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah, it'll make a big difference.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, it's about that time of the month. I can't thank you guys enough for coming on and
Thank you.
joining us, bringing your experience and your message to the educators who tune into to the show. Again, Ronnie, you've been you're a huge part of my childhood. I think of the name Ron Jenkins. I think of the word respect, like just straight respect for you, who you are as a man, especially as a football player. It was just straight up respect, man. And I'm so glad that you responded so quickly and agreed to come on tonight. And Richard, thanks for coming on and joining us. I know you feel out nervous because you're from Cal State Fullerton. We're both over here, so not against you. But again, I'm so honored that you joined us. And I know, Ron,
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey. So we talked earlier about possibly doing some follow-ups to this show. Sure. So you dropped names of some other people that we can bring on and continue this conversation, because these are conversations that need to be had. I know through a lot of your stories, I felt uncomfortable, which is something that I tell people when I do professional development. If you feel uncomfortable, you feel outside of your comfort zone, that's where you need to be. And I definitely felt uncomfortable with listening to a lot of your stories, because there are things that I'm aware of, that I know about, but to actually hear from people who've gone through it is powerful. So definitely I felt uncomfortable, and I just felt I felt myself empowered listening to you guys. So I definitely want to keep this going. We'll keep the dialogue going and look for more Wednesday nights and continue these great conversations.
And we got some thank yous for those commenting on YouTube and Facebook as well. So
tons of love.
Awesome.
Love. Thank you.
One thing I just want to say, you guys out there, pick up Richard's book, Dad at 14. Dad at 14. Okay. And here's a book that I've been a part of. This is Carissa Phelps. It's called Runaway Girl. She was forced into prostitution at 13. I became her counselor. 10 years later, she found me and told me I saved her life. She wrote a book. She has a documentary out called Carissa. You can find it on Vimeo. Check it out. And Adam, I can't wait till we talk about this story. Teachers, you are the real heroes. You are the real heroes. Don't let nobody tell you you're not, okay? Nothing starts without education. Absolutely nothing. We love you guys. Hey, Richard, I love you. I love you, Adam.
Love you guys. Teachers, go teachers.
All right.
Yeah. Hey, you deserve more money. You deserve more money. We're gonna double your pay. That's what we need to do. Damn. Nice. Hey man, we got money to fight wars, but we can't pay teachers. Whatever.
Yeah.
You're right.
Terrible.
Been millions for war, man. 65% of your tax money goes to FICA. Are you serious? I mean, goes to the military.
Yeah.
You can't take 10% and give it to our education people? Come on, man.
Yep.
Educators are the real heroes. Always.
Always.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
guys. Thank
we
you,
appreciate it.
and we'll definitely be in touch.
Absolutely. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye.
All right, guys. Good night.